Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are beginning a massive three-part journey into one of the darkest, most stylish, and most terrifying chapters of World War II. We are not going to the front lines. We are not going to the bunkers of Berlin or the beaches of Normandy. We are going to the heart of Paris, to the most elegant district in the city, to a house that became a legend of horror. We often think of the Nazi occupation of France in black and white terms. There were the German soldiers in their gray uniforms, marching down the Champs-Élysées, and there were the brave French resistance fighters hiding in the shadows. But history is never that simple. Between the black and the white, there was a gray zone, a zone inhabited by opportunists, traitors, and monsters. And the kings of this gray zone were not Germans, they were Frenchmen. This is the story of the Bulge, better known as the French Gestapo. It is the story of how a petty thief and a disgraced police inspector built a criminal empire under the protection of the SS. It is the story of torture chambers located right beneath dance floors where champagne flowed like water. It is a story of absolute power, absolute corruption, and the violent, bloody end that awaited them. So let's turn back the clock. It is August 1944. The heat in Paris is suffocating. The Allies have broken out of Normandy. The Americans are racing toward the Seine. The German army is retreating. And at number 93, Rue Lauriston, in the 16th arrondissement of Paris, the party is finally coming to an end. The most dangerous men in France are packing their bags. They are burning their files, and they are realizing, for the first time in 4 years, that they are not gods, they are prey. To understand the panic of those final 24 hours, you first have to understand the place, 93 Rue Lauriston. To the casual observer walking past in 1943 or early 1944, this building looked like the residence of a wealthy banker or perhaps a foreign diplomat. It is a beautiful, neoclassical mansion. But the neighbors knew better. They knew that if you walked past this house at night, when the street traffic died down, you could hear things. Terrible things. Muffled screams rising from the basement vents, the sounds of heavy beatings. And bizarrely, mixing with those screams, you could hear the sound of jazz music, laughter, and clinking glasses coming from the upper floors. This building was a schizophrenic nightmare. It was the headquarters of the Henri Lafont gang. Who was Henri Lafont? Before the war, he was nobody. His real name was Henri Chamberlain. He was an orphan, a drifter, a petty criminal who stole cars and passed bad checks. He spent more time in prison than out of it. He was illiterate, uneducated, and by all accounts, destined to die in a gutter. But Henri Lafont had a gift. He had a feral charisma, a total lack of morality, and a terrifying kind of intelligence. When the Germans occupied Paris in 1940, Lafont saw an opportunity that no one else saw. While other criminals went into hiding, Lafont walked right into the German headquarters. He made them an offer. He told them, "You are foreigners here. You don't know the streets of Paris. You don't know who the resistance members are. You don't know who the British agents are. But I do. I know the underworld. Give me a badge. Give me the authority, and I will do your dirty work for you." The Nazis accepted. They gave this career criminal the rank of SS Hauptsturmführer. They gave him a card that said he worked for the German police, and most importantly, they gave him carte blanche. They told him, do what you want, steal what you want, kill who you want, just catch our enemies. And so, the Carling was born. Lafont went to the prisons of Paris and released his friends, murderers, pimps, bank robbers, fraudsters. He put them in expensive suits, gave them Gestapo ID cards, and moved them into the mansion on Rue Lauriston. Suddenly, the criminal underworld became the police. The wolves were given the keys to the sheep pen. For 4 years, they lived like emperors. Lafont, the man who used to sleep on park benches, now drove a white Bentley. He wore bespoke suits, tailored by the best in Paris. He threw lavish parties, where German generals mingled with French actresses, fashion designers, and collaborators. They drank vintage champagne stolen from the bestsellers in France. They ate caviar, while the rest of Paris starved. But the brain behind this operation wasn't Lafont. It was his partner, Pierre Bonny. And this is where the story gets truly twisted. Bonny wasn't originally a criminal. He was once the most famous police inspector in France. He was a detective genius, known for solving high-profile cases in the 1930s. But he was also deeply corrupt. He had been fired from the force for fabricating evidence and taking bribes. When the war started, Bonny was a broken man, bitter and angry at the French Republic that had rejected him. Lafont found him and brought him in. It was a match made in hell. Lafont provided the muscle and the violence. Bonny provided the intellect and the organization. Bonny created the files. He organized the network of informants. He taught the thugs how to conduct interrogations. Together, they turned 93 Rue Lauriston into the most feared address in the city. If you received a summons to Rue Lauriston, you knew you were probably never coming back. But now, let's fast forward to August 17th, 1944. The atmosphere inside the mansion has changed completely. The jazz music has stopped. The champagne bottles are gathering dust. The white Bentley is parked in the courtyard, but it's no longer a symbol of power. It's a getaway vehicle. The news from the front is catastrophic. The Americans are at Chartres. General Leclerc's 2nd Armored Division is approaching the suburbs. The German High Command in Paris is burning documents. The Wehrmacht is preparing to retreat. And the men of the French Gestapo are suddenly realizing a terrifying truth. Their German protectors are leaving without them. Imagine the scene inside the house on that sweltering August morning. The air conditioning of the era, open windows, does little to cool the heat. But the sweat on the foreheads of Lafont's lieutenants is not from the weather, it's from fear. For 4 years, they acted as if the Reich would last 1,000 years. They tortured resistance fighters, they deported Jews, they looted museums, they shot hostages, they burned every bridge behind them. There is no going back. There is no switching sides for men like Lafont and Bonny. They are marked for death. Henri Lafont stands in his office on the 2nd floor. He is wearing a German uniform, the field gray tunic of the Wehrmacht, which he liked to wear in the final days. He's looking out the window at the quiet street below. He lights a cigarette. His hand is steady, but his eyes are dark. He is in denial. He is a man who believes that money can fix anything, and he has a lot of money. He has amassed gold coins, diamonds, and pearls, all stolen from his victims. He thinks he can buy his way out of this, just like he bought his way out of prison in the 1930s.
But Pierre Bonny knows better. Bonny enters the office. He looks terrible. He is yellow, gaunt, dying of liver disease. He is the realist. He knows the law, and he knows what French justice does to traitors. "We have to go, Henri," he says. His voice is weak, trembling. The resistance is rising in the streets. The police have gone on strike. They are hunting us. If we stay here another 24 hours, they will storm the house and hang us from the balconies. Lafont nods. He knows Bonny is right. It is time to dismantle the empire. And the first step is to destroy the evidence. The order is given. Burn everything. In the cobblestone courtyard of 93 Rue Lauriston, a massive bonfire is lit. This is not a small fire. It is a funeral pyre for the secrets of the occupation. The thugs of the Carling, men who usually walk with a swagger, guns tucked into their belts, are now running back and forth like panicked ants. They carry armfuls of files, interrogation transcripts, lists of paid informers, photos of underground networks, receipts for stolen gold. The fire roars. Black smoke rises into the summer sky, drifting over the rooftops of the 16th arrondissement. The neighbors, watching from behind their lace curtains, know exactly what that smoke means. It smells of burning paper and desperation. It is the smell of the end of an era. But even as the archives burn, there is a darker problem to solve: the basement. The cells are not empty. There are prisoners down there, men and women who were arrested days or weeks ago, British agents, resistance leaders, Jewish families held for ransom. What do you do with them when you are fleeing? Do you release them? Do you leave them locked up for the Allies to find? If Lafont releases them, they are witnesses. They can identify the torturers. They can testify at the trials. For a man like Henri Lafont, mercy is a foreign language. He is a gangster, and gangsters do not leave loose ends. In those final chaotic hours, the brutality of Rue Lauriston reaches its peak. Decisions are made in split seconds. Get rid of them, Lafont says, waving his hand as if dismissing a waiter. Some prisoners are dragged out of the cells, blinkered by the sudden sunlight, and shoved into the trunks of cars. They're driven to the Bois de Boulogne, the large park on the edge of Paris. There, near a waterfall, or in a quiet clearing, they are forced to kneel. A single shot to the back of the head. Their bodies are left in the bushes, discovered days later by walkers. Others are loaded onto trucks and driven to the train stations, forced onto the very last convoys heading east to Buchenwald and Ravensbrück. Many of them will never return. Even as his empire crumbles, Lafont ensures that his victims suffer until the very end. Inside the mansion, the looting begins. The Carling isn't just fleeing, they are stealing the silverware on the way out. They are stripping the house. Paintings are taken off the walls. Expensive rugs are rolled up. Cases of champagne are loaded into the cars. It is a scene of grotesque greed. These men are about to lose their lives, yet they are obsessed with taking their stolen wealth with them. Lafont is supervising the packing of his personal treasure, suitcases heavy with gold coins, boxes of jewelry ripped from the necks of women sent to Auschwitz. He believes this gold is his passport. He believes that with enough money, he can bribe the Spanish border guards, disappear into Madrid or South America, and live like a king in exile. But there is a tension in the air. The friends of Lafont, the other collaborators, the high society figures who used to attend his parties, are nowhere to be seen. The actresses aren't calling. The fashion designers have suddenly joined the resistance. The German officers, who used to slap him on the back and call him Henri, are too busy saving their own skins. The telephone in the office, which used to ring constantly with requests for favors, is silent. Lafont realizes he is alone. He and his band of thugs are isolated. They are the rats left on the sinking ship after the captain has already taken the lifeboat. Noon approaches on August 18th, 1944. The convoy is ready. This is not a military convoy. It is a gangster caravan, a line of black Citroën traction Avants, the iconic cars of the French Gestapo, low to the ground, fast, menacing, are idling in the street. Their engines are purring. And of course, the white Bentley, Lafont's personal chariot. Lafont steps out of the front door of number 93 for the last time. He pauses on the steps. He looks at the building that made him a legend. He looks at the windows of the second floor where he drank with generals. He looks at the basement vents where his victims screamed. Does he feel remorse? Does he feel guilt? Witnesses say he looked calm, almost bored. He adjusted his hat, checked his watch, and lit his cigarette. He was playing the role until the very end, the untouchable godfather. He climbs into the car. Next to him sits his mistress. In the back seat, piles of cash and submachine guns. Pierre Bonny climbs into another car, clutching his stomach, his face a mask of pain and terror. The order is given. The engines rev. The convoy peels away from the curb, tires screeching on the cobblestones. They speed down Rue Lauriston, turning the corner, disappearing from view. The neighbors peering through their shutters finally exhale. The monster has left the lair. But where are they going? They can't go east to Germany. The Wehrmacht doesn't want them. They can't go west. The Americans are there. They have a plan. Or rather, a delusion. Lafont owns a farm, a secluded estate in the countryside about 100 kilometers south of Paris called Bastogne-sur-Libets. It is a fortress in the middle of nowhere. Lafont believes they can hide there. He thinks they can lay low, wait for the chaos of the liberation to settle down, and then slip away to Spain. As the black Citroëns race out of Paris, dodging the barricades that the resistance has started to build, Lafont thinks he has escaped. He thinks he has outsmarted destiny one last time. But he is wrong. He is not driving to safety. He is driving into a trap. The French forces of the interior, the FFI, are already tracking him. They know the cars, they know the license plates, and they know exactly where he is going. The King of Paris has left his castle, and now out in the open, he is vulnerable. The hunter has become the hunted. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of the first chapter of this saga. The House of Screams is empty, but the drama is far from over. In the next part, we will follow the gang to their farm in Bastogne-sur-Libets. We will witness the surreal scene of gangsters trying to live a country life while surrounded by millions of francs and stolen gold. We will see the betrayal that brought them down, a betrayal by their closest business partner, a man who played both sides of the war. And we will see the shootout that finally put Henri Lafont in handcuffs. If you thought the crimes at Rue Lariston were shocking, wait until you hear what happened at the trial. You won't believe the audacity of Lafont's defense. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on because part 2 is coming very soon, and it is a story of siege, betrayal, and the collapse of a criminal empire. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
The Gangster of the Gestapo, The Fall of 93 Rue Lariston, Part 2, The Siege and the Judgment. Welcome back. In the last episode, we watched as the Carling, the French Gestapo, fled Paris in a convoy of black Citroëns, leaving behind a burning pile of archives and a basement full of ghosts. They were running from the American army, running from the resistance, and running from their own crimes. Henri Lafont, the king of the Paris underworld, believed he had an escape plan. He believed that with enough gold and enough guns, he could survive anything. But today, we're going to see what happens when the illusion breaks. We are going to follow the gang to their hideout in the countryside, where they spent 10 surreal days living in a golden cage. We will meet the man who betrayed them, a billionaire who played both sides of the war. And we will take a front row seat at the trial of the century, where Lafont delivered one of the most cynical and arrogant defenses in legal history. So let's pick up the story where we left off. It is late August 1944. Imagine the scene. While Paris is exploding with the joy of liberation, while General de Gaulle is marching down the Champs-Élysées amidst cheering crowds, a very different reality is playing out just 100 kilometers to the south. We are at a place called Bastogne-sur-Libets. It is a quiet, rustic farming village, and on the edge of this village stands a fortified farmhouse known as Les Patis. This was Henri Lafont's country estate. For 10 days, this farm became the last stronghold of the French Gestapo. Inside, the atmosphere was bizarre. It was a mix of a luxury vacation and a siege. The house was packed to the rafters with loot. Suitcases overflowed with gold coins, bundles of francs and jewelry. The garage was full of stolen cars. The wine cellar was stocked with vintage champagne. Henri Lafont, ever the showman, tried to keep the morale up. He walked around the grounds wearing a silk dressing gown, smoking expensive cigarettes, telling his men that everything was under control. He had his mistress with him. He had his lieutenants. To the outside observer, it looked like a party. But in the corner of the living room sat Pierre Bonny. The brilliant ex-detective was dying. His skin was yellow, his body was ravaged by liver disease, and his mind was consumed by fear. He knew what Lafont refused to admit. There was no way out. The roads to Spain were blocked. The Germans had abandoned them. They were trapped. Bonny spent his days burning the last of the incriminating papers in the fireplace, drinking heavily to numb the pain, and waiting for the inevitable knock on the door. And that knock was coming because the Karling didn't fall due to a brilliant military operation. It fell because of a betrayal. To understand this betrayal, we have to introduce one of the most fascinating and shadowy figures of World War II, Joseph Jonovich. He was a scrap metal dealer. He was a billionaire. He was also a Jew born in Bessarabia. During the occupation, he pulled off the ultimate high-wire act. He became the primary supplier of metal to the Nazi war machine, making a fortune, while simultaneously funding the French resistance and bribing the Gestapo to keep himself alive. He was Henri Lafont's closest business partner. They had dined together, done deals together, and gotten rich together. But in August 1944, Joseph Jonovich looked at the map and realized the wind had changed. The Nazis were losing. If you wanted to survive the liberation, if you wanted to avoid the firing squad, he needed to give the new French government a gift, a big gift. And what better gift than the head of the French Gestapo? Jonovich went to the French police. He sat down with Inspector Morin, a man who had been hunting the gang for years, and he gave them the address. "They are at Bulge," he said, "and they are waiting." On the morning of August 30th, 1944, the silence of the countryside was shattered. A convoy of trucks appeared on the horizon. It wasn't the Germans. It was the French forces of the interior, heavily armed and led by Inspector Morin. They surrounded the farm. They set up machine gun nests in the fields. They blocked the roads. Inside the farmhouse, panic erupted. The thugs grabbed their submachine guns. They looked to Lafont for orders. They had enough firepower to start a small war. They could have fought to the death. But Henri Lafont did something unexpected. He didn't order them to shoot. He walked to the mirror. He adjusted his tie. He combed his hair. He put on a sharp suit, and then he walked out the front door, unarmed. He stood on the porch, lit a cigarette, and smiled at the dozens of rifles pointed at his chest. "Gentlemen, there is no need for noise. I am Henri Lafont. Who is in charge?" Why did he surrender without a fight? Because of hubris. Lafont was so arrogant, so convinced of his own power, that he truly believed he couldn't be killed. He thought this was just another negotiation. He thought he could bribe the police or threaten them with blackmail or make a deal. He thought he was too rich to die. He was wrong. Inspector Morin didn't want a deal. He wanted justice. Lafont and Bonny were handcuffed. The farm was searched, and what the police found stunned them. It was Aladdin's cave. Millions of francs in cash, kilos of gold bars, piles of furs, and in the garage, the legendary white Bentley, the symbol of their terror. The kings of Paris were thrown into the back of a police van, but they weren't taken back to their palace on Rue Lauriston. They were taken to the Consigliere. The symbolism was perfect. The Consigliere is the ancient medieval prison in the heart of Paris where Queen Marie Antoinette was held before she was guillotined. Now the king of the street was sitting in the same damp cells, waiting for his own execution. For 3 months, they sat in prison while the new French government prepared the case. This wasn't going to be a quiet trial. This was going to be the trial of the century. The French public demanded blood. They wanted to see the monsters who had tortured their sons and daughters. On December 1st, 1944, the doors of the courtroom swung open. The room was packed. Journalists from all over the world were there. The flashbulbs were blinding. When the defendants were brought in, a gasp went through the crowd. The two partners, who had ruled Paris together, couldn't have looked more different. Pierre Bonny was a wreck. He had to be carried into the courtroom on a stretcher. He was emaciated, dying of cancer, wrapped in blankets. He spent the trial weeping, moaning in pain, and trying to blame everything on everyone else. He was a pathetic figure, stripped of all his power. But Henri Lafont? Lafont treated the trial like a stage. He strode into the dock with his head high. He smirked at the journalists. He winked at the women in the audience. When the judge read out the list of charges, torture, murder, racketeering, treason, Lafont looked bored. He decided that if he was going down, he was going to take the entire French establishment down with him. When the prosecutor accused him of being a traitor, Lafont leaned into the microphone and delivered one of the most cynical speeches in legal history. He looked at the judge and said, "Why are you judging me? I was a criminal before the war. You knew who I was. The Germans gave me a badge. I did what I always did. I stole. I schemed. Why are you surprised? I didn't change. The times changed." And then he looked out at the audience, at the rows of French officials, lawyers, and socialites who had come to watch him die, and he pointed a finger at them and dropped a bombshell. "Look at you," he sneered. "Half of you were begging me for favors 3 months ago. You came to my parties, you drank my champagne, you asked me to get your nephews out of prison, or to get you extra petrol coupons. I should have kept a guest book. If I had, half of this courtroom would be sitting in the dock next to me." A silence fell over the room. Everyone knew he was telling the truth. Lafont had corrupted the entire city. But the prosecutor had evidence that couldn't be laughed away. Witnesses took the stand. Survivors of Rue Lauriston. They described the bathtub tortures. They described the beatings. They described how Lafont would laugh while men screamed in the basement. Lafont didn't deny it. In fact, he mocked the prosecutor for underestimating him. "You say I killed 100 people?" Lafont interrupted. "That is an insult. I killed far more than that. If I had only killed 100, I wouldn't be famous." It was a display of absolute nihilism. He knew he was dead, and he didn't care. But there was one moment where the mask slipped. During the trial, it was revealed that Pierre Bunny had kept a secret diary. In it, he had written down the names of everyone they had bribed. Bunny tried to use this diary to bargain for his life. He offered to sell the secrets of the collaboration to the new government. Lafont looked at his partner with pure disgust. To Lafont, Bunny was breaking the code. You live by the gun, you die by the gun. You don't beg. "Look at him," Lafont said to the court, pointing at the dying Bunny. "He is the garbage. I am the boss." On December 11th, 1944, the trial came to an end. The jury didn't take long. The judge read out the sentences. Pierre Bunny, death. And Henri Lafont, death. And with them, death sentences for their top lieutenants, including Alexander Villaplan, the former captain of the French national football team who had become a sadistic killer for the gang. When the sentence was read, the courtroom erupted. People cheered. Bunny collapsed on his stretcher, sobbing into his hands. Lafont stood up. He adjusted his collar. He looked at his lawyer, smiled, and said loud enough for the reporters to hear, "Well, counselor, it seems the party is finally over." He was led out of the courtroom, back to the cells of Fresnes prison. He had 15 days left to live. Most men would spend those 15 days praying or writing letters to their families. Lafont spent them planning his outfit for the execution. He told the guards, "I have lived like a prince, I will die like a prince." But the story doesn't end with the bang of the gavel. The most dramatic moment was yet to come. The execution itself would become a legend of the Paris underworld. In the next and final part of this series, we will wake up on the morning after Christmas 1944. We will follow Lafont and Bunny on their final car ride to the Fort de Montrouge. We will witness the stark contrast between the cowardice of the cop and the bravado of the gangster, and we will hear the final, famous last words that Henri Lafont shouted at the firing squad before the bullets flew.
The Gangster of the Gestapo, The Fall of 93 Rue Lauriston, Part 3, The Devil's Christmas. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel for the final chapter of our series on the French Gestapo. If you have been with us for the first two parts, you have watched the rise of Henri Lafont and Pierre Bony. You saw them turn a beautiful Parisian mansion into a torture chamber. You saw them drink champagne with Nazis while their countrymen starved. And in the last episode, you saw them sitting in a courtroom, listening to a judge sentence them to death. Today, the story comes to its bloody conclusion. We are going to witness the final morning of the Carling. We will see how two men who lived as partners died as opposites, one as a coward, the other as a legend of the underworld. We will find out what happened to the billions of francs in stolen gold that vanished. And we will visit 93 Rue Lauriston today to see what remains of the House of Screams. So, let's set the scene. It is December 26th, 1944, Boxing Day. Paris is waking up from its first liberated Christmas in 4 years. The lights are back on in the City of Light. American soldiers are walking the streets. The cafes are full. There is a feeling of hope in the air. The nightmare of the occupation is finally fading. But on the outskirts of the city, in the cold gray walls of Frey's prison, the nightmare is ending in a very literal way. Inside the death row block, the silence is heavy. It is 8 a.m. The guards are walking down the corridor. Their boots echo on the concrete. They stop at cell number 1, then cell number 2. Keys rattle in the locks. The heavy doors swing open. The words spoken are ritualistic, cold, and final. Lafont, Bony, be brave. It is time. This is the moment where the masks fall off. For 4 years, these men played the role of untouchable gods, but facing a firing squad is the ultimate truth serum. Let's look at Pierre Bony first. Bony was the brains, the corrupt super cop, the man who kept the files, who knew where the bodies were buried, who thought he could outsmart everyone. On this morning, the intellect of Pierre Bony completely failed him. When the guards entered, they found a broken man. His liver disease, hastened by fear and stress, had ravaged his body. He was yellow, skeletal, and trembling uncontrollably. He couldn't stand up. The guards had to lift him from his cot. He was weeping, murmuring prayers, begging for a reprieve that wasn't coming. He had to be carried out of the cell on a stretcher, wrapped in a blanket like a sick child. The man who had ruthlessly interrogated resistance fighters, who had sent men to the firing squad with the stroke of his pen, was completely paralyzed by the terror of his own death. It was a pathetic end for the most feared policeman in France. But Henri Lafont, the illiterate orphan, the petty thief who became the king of Paris? Lafont treated his execution like it was a red carpet event. When the guards opened his door, Lafont was already awake. He was dressed, and not just dressed, he was impeccable. He wore a perfectly tailored suit made from the finest English wool. His white shirt was crisp. His tie was perfectly knotted. He wore a fedora hat tilted at a jaunty angle. In the French justice system of the time, there was a tradition. A condemned man was offered a final cigarette and a glass of rum before the ride to the execution site. Lafont accepted both. He smoked slowly, savoring the tobacco. He downed the rum in one smooth gulp. He chatted with his lawyer, smiling, making small talk. According to the witnesses in the room, he looked around at the grim faces of the officials and cracked a joke. He said, "It's a pity. I was just getting used to the quiet life in here." It was a performance, a final act of defiance. Lafont knew that history was watching. He knew that the newspapers would write about this moment. And he decided that if he was going to die, he would die as the gentleman gangster. He looked at the weeping, broken figure of Bony being carried past him, and his face showed nothing but contempt. In the criminal code of Henri Lafont, Bony was breaking the rules. You play the game, you take the risks, and when the bill comes due, you pay it standing up. The two men were loaded into separate police vans. They were joined by 6 of their top lieutenants. Among them was Alexander Villaplan. We mentioned him briefly before, but his presence here is tragic and surreal. Villeplaine had been the captain of the French national football team in the 1930 World Cup. He was a national hero, an athlete. But greed and corruption led him to Rue-Lauriston, where he became a sadistic torturer for Lafont. Now, the former captain was just another traitor in the back of a van, heading to the same wall as the criminals he worked for. The convoy drove through the streets of Paris. It was a cold, frosty morning. The windows of the vans were barred. They drove south to the Fort de Montrouge. This was an old 19th century military fortress. Its high stone walls and dry moat made it the designated execution site for the traitors of the collaboration. The vans pulled into the courtyard. The engines were cut. The silence of the winter morning was deafening. Waiting for them were 12 wooden stakes driven into the frozen ground. And facing the stakes was the firing squad. These were not regular soldiers. These were men from the FFI, the French Forces of the Interior, the Resistance. Just months ago, Lafont and Boney were hunting these men. Now, these men were holding the rifles. The irony was palpable. The wheel of fortune had turned completely. Boney was dragged to his post. He couldn't stand, so the executioners had to tie him tightly to the stake with ropes to keep him upright. He was slumped over, eyes shut tight, mumbling incoherently. He was already half dead from fear. Lafont walked to his stake with a casual stroll, as if he were walking into a nightclub. He leaned against the wood. He lit one last cigarette. An officer approached him carrying a black blindfold. This was standard procedure. It was meant to be a mercy, so the condemned didn't have to see the guns. Lafont waved him away with a dismissive flick of his hand. He said, "I don't need that." He said it loud and clear. "I want to see the view. And besides, I want to look death in the face."
The officers stepped back. The firing squad raised their rifles. The sound of bolts clicking into place echoed off the stone walls. Lafont stood alone. He looked at the 12 men aiming at his heart. He didn't flinch. He didn't close his eyes. And then, in the final second, he shouted his last words. They were not words of repentance. They were not a prayer. They were a final act of vanity. He grinned, straightened his scarf, and yelled, "Hey, boys, don't aim for the face. I want to look good in the coffin." Fire! The command was given. A volley of shots rang out. A cloud of smoke filled the air. Lafont's body jerked back violently against the ropes. This cigarette fell from his lips. His head slumped forward. Pierre Bonny just went limp, hanging like a sack of potatoes. The King of Paris and his brain were dead. The commanding officer walked up to the bodies. He drew his service revolver. He placed the barrel against Lafont's temple and fired the coup de grace, the mercy shot. Then he did the same to Bonny. It was 9:10 a.m. The reign of the French Gestapo was officially over. But, my friends, the death of these men is not the end of the story. The ripples of their crimes continued for decades. Let's talk about the loose ends. What happened to Joseph Jonovici, the billionaire scrap dealer who betrayed them? The man who gave the police the address of the farm. He thought he had bought his freedom. He thought that by handing over Lafont, the new government would forgive his years of collaboration with the Nazis. He was wrong. You can buy a lot of things, but you cannot buy history. The French government accepted his gift, but they didn't forget his crimes. Jonovici was arrested in 1947. He was put on trial. He lost everything: his fortune, his reputation, his freedom. He died in 1965, penniless and obscure. The man who played both sides eventually lost on both. And what about the gold? This is the great mystery that still haunts treasure hunters in France. We know that the Carlings stole billions. Gold bars, diamonds, piles of cash. When the police raided the farm at Bastogne, they found a lot. But they didn't find everything. Lafont had days to prepare. Rumors persist to this day that he buried watertight suitcases filled with gold in the fields around the farmhouse, or in the forest of Fontainebleau. Did he leave a map? Did he tell his mistress? No one knows. Every few years, someone shows up with a metal detector in that part of France, looking for the devil's gold. As far as we know, it is still there, rotting in the ground. And finally, what about the house itself? 93 Rue Lauriston. If you go to Paris today, you can find it. It is in the 16th arrondissement, one of the most expensive and posh neighborhoods in the city. The building is still beautiful. It has a cream-colored stone facade, elegant balconies, large windows, and today, it is an office building. It houses international companies. Inside, secretaries type on computers, executives hold meetings, people drink coffee in the break room. The soundproofed cells in the basement have been renovated. They are storage rooms now, filled with boxes of paper and old files. But the locals say the building feels heavy. There's a weight to it. If you stand on the sidewalk and look closely near the entrance, you will see a small, simple stone plaque attached to the wall. Most tourists walk right past it, but if you stop and read it, the text sends a chill down your spine. It reads, "Here from 1940 to 1944, the French Gestapo tortured patriots for the enemy." It is a permanent scar on the face of Paris. The story of Henri Lafont is a terrifying reminder of human nature. He wasn't a political fanatic. He wasn't a Nazi ideologue. He didn't care about Hitler or National Socialism. He was just a criminal who found himself in a world without laws. He proved that when society collapses, the scum rises to the top. He showed us that the line between a policeman and a gangster is thinner than we think. All it takes is the right uniform and the wrong opportunity. Henri Lafont lived like a king for 4 years because he was willing to do what others wouldn't. But in the end, he learned the oldest lesson in the book. You can't outrun your shadow. He died as he lived, arrogant, violent, and alone. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark heart of occupied Paris. This was a heavy story, full of blood and betrayal, but it is a story that needs to be told. If you enjoyed this deep dive documentary series, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make more of these long-form scripts. And let me know in the comments below what is another untold story of World War II you want me to uncover. The secret rat lines to Argentina? The fate of the Nazi scientists? Or maybe the mystery of the Amber Room? I read every comment and I build these videos for you. Until next time, stay curious and remember, history is watching. Goodbye.